and get started. All right. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. We are here for Buy or Build It, how to get your dream home. So I decided to start this webinar because, quite frankly, I built my own home and moved in 5 years ago. I was lucky enough to stay in the neighborhood where I've lived for 15 years now. And in the process of building my own home, I've had a lot of people ask me questions about how long did it take? What does it cost? How do you hire a contractor? How do you figure out what your floor plan is going to look like? And just the whole process. So I thought this would be a great way to share the information that I learned throughout the process and wish that I had known before I got started too. So I'm going to give you all sorts of tips tonight. So let's dive in. So what we're going to cover today is a little bit about what's happening in the real estate market, just so you're a little bit more educated about what to see if you're a buyer or seller or an investor. Process of building a home, pros and cons of buying versus building a custom home, the cost associated and the investment with purchasing or building a new home, and then, what that means for you if you're a buyer or seller. So who am I? Well, I'm your presenter tonight. My name is Jackie White. I am a realtor with Your Castle Real Estate. And like I mentioned earlier, I built my own custom home a few years ago, and I'm here to share all sorts of stuff about it. I'm also a mom of 2 kids, and boy, are they involved with all sorts of sports. So I'm the mega fan for all of their activities. I would say I'm an average skier, but I'm an expert après skier, as you can tell here with my cold beverage at the end of a day of skiing. I'm a former marketing executive. I used to work for a number of marketing firms and had a lot of clients that I worked for in terms of developing strategic recommendations for them. I've been a real estate investor for about a decade. And I'm also a realtor as well. So, and in addition to that, I am also very active in my community when it comes to wildfire, education, prevention, and advocacy when it comes to educating folks about the dangers of wildfire. I'm also serving as a director on our local fire department, Inter Canyon Fire Protection District. So if you ever want to get something done, I think it might have been Ben Franklin said, ask a busy person. So you should ask me, I can help you with your to-do list. So as of last summer, I hit a milestone of having helped over 250 families buy, sell, and invest in real estate. And it's been a lot of fun throughout the journey here. And I've got many more to come. So that's just a little bit about me. So as we move forward here, let's talk about what's happening in the real estate market, because this is going to impact what you might want to do, whether it's buying or building a home. And keep in mind that when you see stuff in the news, whether you're reading the paper, looking online, or watching the local news, the news outlets like to say, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So they're going to find the best way to sensationalize any story it is that they're covering. And with that being said, not everything is accurate. So keep in mind, the last 3 years since the beginning of the pandemic has just been a whirlwind of real estate activity. A lot of that was driven by people being stuck at home and reevaluating their space and saying, honey, I don't know that I like this kitchen anymore. Or boy, we're busting at the seams with everybody being at home and working from home and doing school. And maybe we don't like this neighborhood anymore. And we need to have a little bit more elbow room and acreage at our house. So that drove a lot of that, in addition to very low interest rates, as low as 2.5% on a 30-year mortgage, which is really unheard of. It's almost like free money. So that drove a lot of activity over the last couple of years, but we're really getting more into 2019 normalcy pre-pandemic in terms of real estate when it comes to buying and selling houses. So that period where our hair was on fire and everything was a frenzy is calming down, which truthfully is kind of nice to have it be a little bit more balanced. And anytime there's a change in the real estate market, it presents an opportunity. It's just a matter of for whom, right? And what that's going to mean for you. So I'm going to share just a little bit to give you up to speed on the real estate market as it exists today. Something I wanted to show historically, though, is really home prices and what they've been over the last roughly 45 years. So the solid line here in this chart represents homes, the average home price, and then the dotted line are condos and townhomes over the last 45 years. And so you can see the average home price and how much that has grown over time. And really what we're looking at with this dip here in 2007, 2008, in terms of home prices was our recession, right? I know there's a lot of talk about, are we in a recession? Are we stepping into one right now? And keep in mind, over the last 45 years, we only had 2 where home prices declined. So they're certainly going up. We're anticipating it might slow down a little bit this springtime, but honestly, so far what I'm seeing is that things are quite strong. So again, whether you're buying or building or purchasing a home, then this is the thing that you need to be aware of is really just what's happening in the market today, because for most folks, owning a home is their largest investment. So when it comes to home prices, again, just remember, just because we're having a recession doesn't mean that home prices go down. If you look at the last 6 recessions, only 2 home prices actually went down. And in 2008, that was really driven by the really loose lending requirements. If you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan. And those have all changed dramatically. So we're just not in that environment anymore. And keep in mind, like I said, home prices have gone up an average 6% a year. And in all but the last 44 years, just a couple of years, did they actually go down. So just because we have a record year in terms of home prices doesn't mean they have to go down the next year. Now, something that tends to lead people to think about building a home has to do with inventory and what's available to buy, because I work with a lot of folks and they'll go out, look at houses and be like, gosh, I'm just not finding what I want. What the heck? Let's just build it, right? And this chart kind of demonstrates what's happening. So if you look at the solid line, these are the homes that have been active on the market. And these are the homes, the dotted line are what actually sold. And so the gap between these 2 lines represents the homes that were available to purchase. And you can see that for several years in a row here, we have had very, very limited inventory. So pretty much everything that's coming on the market is selling pretty quickly. And again, that really is what leads to buyers or people that are looking to upgrade or downsize their home to think about, maybe I just need to build what I'm looking for because I can't find it anywhere. Right now, as interest rates have gone up a little bit, those 2 lines are beginning to spread. So we're seeing a little bit more of balancing, but we still have a strong seller's market. So if you own a home and it's priced correctly, you're still going to get a good price for it. Now, the other thing that we're seeing in terms of inventory is that home builders have not been building a lot of homes like they did over the last few decades. So because of the recession and the housing crisis that we had in 2007, 2008, a lot of builders were very cautious in terms of starting new construction. And so you can see we had a huge decline over the last decade, 2010 to 2019, where home builders were a little bit more conservative in terms of building homes because they just didn't want to get stuck holding on to that inventory if we had any sort of housing issues. And like I mentioned earlier, again, with that lack of inventory of homes, it still leaves us in what we call a seller's market, which is really defined by the months of inventory. So how much inventory do we have of homes that are available to purchase? And that will dictate what environment we're in, whether it's a buyer's or seller's market. And certainly for the last decade, we have been in a seller's market. So what does that mean for you? So as long as the inventory of homes is low, if you own a home, the value is going to go up. And if you are a seller, you're generally going to have the edge on negotiations. And if you are an investor and you own rental properties, your rents are going to stay strong. So let's go into why folks might consider building a custom home. So when you are purchasing your next house, you've got a couple options. So you could buy an existing home, right? Something was built years ago. You could buy a tract home by what we call a production builder. So that's going to be like a Lennar, Century Homes, KB. These are all the production builders that come in, they buy acres of land, they plat it all out, and they have their inventory and their menu of home options that you have to purchase. So those are what we call tract homes or subdivisions, where it's built by the same builder or 1 or 2 builders. See a lot of this out in Aurora, parts of Littleton, and it could be large tracts of home, or it could be what we call infill. So maybe it's a smaller area that the builder has required, and maybe they're building maybe 40 or 50 homes, or it could be hundreds of homes. So it really kind of depends on what's available. And then your last option really is to kind of look at building a custom home. So those are what you could consider for purchasing your next home. So let's talk about the pros and cons of buying an existing home. So if you're going to buy something that's already there, maybe it's 5, 10, 15 years old or older, quite frankly, it's a more affordable option. If somebody has done all of the work for you already. It's kind of like buying a car, right? You know how when you drive it off the lot, it's already depreciated a little bit. It's a heck of a lot cheaper to buy an existing home. Somebody's done all the work already, and it's going to be likely in an established neighborhood. So you can drive the roads, get a sense of what the curb appeal is like of the other homes. The landscaping is going to be mature because the trees have grown over time, and you can just move in. You don't have to wait months and months for it to be completed. And really, in terms of the overall investment, all day long, it is far more affordable to buy an existing home, even if you're going to renovate all of the kitchen, the bathrooms, flooring, paint, maybe even do some new facade on the exterior. I tell you, even with the cost of hiring a contractor today, which has grown quite a bit in the last couple of years, it still is going to be cheaper than building a brand new home. So just keep that in mind. There are some pros when it comes to buying an existing home. Now, there are also some cons. So, depending on the age of the house, the floor plans may just be a little bit more dated. Right now, everybody likes open concept, great rooms where you can see what's happening in the kitchen if you're sitting in the family room, or you can see the dining area, and everybody's engaged with what's happening as a family. Where I think about the last home I owned, it was built in the late 70s, and we had the family room and then the dining room and then the kitchen, and everything was compartmentalized. You didn't know what everybody was doing in the other rooms. So that can be really kind of tough to renovate if you buy an existing home, because you have load-bearing walls, and sometimes you just can't knock stuff out if you want to renovate. Sometimes there's more repairs and maintenance. As homes get older, there's just stuff that breaks or needs to be replaced. So you have to kind of budget for those things when you're buying an older home. And, your utility bills might be a little bit higher depending on how well it's insulated, how tight the windows are. Those are all just things you have to think about. It could be less personalized because you may have to come in and, make some modifications or just live with whatever the previous homeowners had picked in terms of cabinets and paint colors and things like that. Now, you may not have, all of the things that you're looking for, but you're also going to compete with other buyers too, because they're all going to be looking at that home, right? Especially in this environment where we don't have enough homes for sale. So you might run into other buyers that you might have to compete with when you make an offer. And then also, if you're renovating, depending on the extent of the modifications you're making, you might be living in it while it's happening. So you've got dust, you got people coming in and out of the house, and the timeline that you have to adapt to when it comes to maybe not having an oven for 6 weeks or whatever the situation might be. So as far as the process, if you're buying an existing home, so let's talk about this before we talk about actually building one. Of course, this is going to be much slower. So you're going to start out by interviewing for the first week or two realtors and getting a sense of what your budget is by getting pre-approved for a loan. Then you're going to take a few weeks to shop for houses, see what comes on the market, see what's available that fits your needs. Now, once you find a home that you want to make an offer on, takes about 4 weeks to go through what we call the contract period. And that's when you're going to have a home inspection. The appraiser is going to come and visit the house. You're going to research the title, make sure that you're purchasing a home with a clean title. Your lender is going to do all the underwriting on your loan, ensure all of the paperwork has been reviewed, like your tax returns and bank statements and W-2s and all that stuff. So that takes about 30 days. And so overall, the process could take 2 to 3 months. So depending on how decisive you are and how much inventory is available, if you're buying an existing home, that's kind of what you're looking for. So let's talk about some other options. So new construction. So what can you consider when you're building a brand new home that's custom to you? So sky's the limit, depending on what your budget is, right? That's the first point. So you can come up with whatever design you're thinking of in terms of floor plan and what you'd like within your budget, right? So you can look at open concept, flex rooms, you can have larger windows, just things that you may not see in an existing older home. Now, keep in mind that when you have a brand new house too, you can move in. There's really not a whole lot of maintenance, right? Everything is brand new, the roof, the HVAC, the plumbing, electrical. So hopefully everything's operating well, and you're not going to have to think about a whole lot of projects or expense for quite some time. Now, newer homes, I'll tell you, are so much tighter too when it comes to insulation, doors and windows. Boy, I really noticed the difference in my home that I live in today because it is super tight. And so those are things that are certainly pros when it comes to what your utility bills can be over time. And if you're thinking about maybe even solar panels, there's things that you can integrate in from day one, whether you're just looking to keep your electric bills down or maybe have an electric vehicle down the road too. You also get to personalize it, like I mentioned earlier, just looking at your floor plan. How are you going to live in the home? How do you want things set up for the short and long term of building there or living there? And, one of the things that we did when we built our house is we built a ranch with a walkout basement. And, I'm not real young, but I'm also not old either, but I ski. I could twist an ankle, I could do something and hurt myself. And I wanted to make sure I had zero entry into my house, meaning that there's no stairs from the garage or the front door into the home. So I can really age in place and be in my home for decades because I've got the laundry and the master bedroom, the kitchen, everything that I need on the main level. And that can be a big plus as you're thinking about aging in place and building a home too. And when you build a brand new home too, you typically get a builder warranty, and they're going to warranty the materials, workmanship, structural issues, and that's all going to be covered by insurance in the event, hopefully unlikely, that you have any sort of issues down the road. Now, as we look at the cons, there are some you have to think about too when building a new home. So you're going to have certainly higher upfront costs. The cost of construction right now is about $400 per square foot for middle of the road finishes. So it's not the real cheap stuff in terms of finishes, but it's also not the more premium either. So about $400 a square foot. Now that is just going from the ground up. That does not include some other costs, which are buying the land and something else we call soft costs, which is all the investment you make up front before a construction loan comes into play. So that would include any sort of surveys that you do, hiring an architect, putting a deposit down to lock in your time with that contractor, land planning. There's just a lot of soft costs that occur upfront. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Then you have, so not only the land, the soft costs, but then also building the home. So those can add up pretty quick. You also will have a construction loan, most likely. So unless you're paying cash for everything, typically what you do is you start with a construction loan, and they take your design ideas and they determine, okay, based on current market conditions, if you're picking this level of exterior finishing, roof, windows, interior doors, kitchens, bathrooms, etc., this is roughly what the home is going to cost and what it would be valued. So it's basically like getting a huge credit card with a big limit to be able to go and swipe, so to speak, every time there's an expense that occurs. So whether it's the excavator, the mason that's pouring the foundation, the framers that are arriving and putting in all the lumber and beginning to frame, all the plumbing, electrical, every time those builders, subcontractors are there, you have to pay them for the work that they're doing. And so you're drawing off of that basically credit limit on your construction loan until the house is complete. And then what you do is refinance out of that construction loan into what we call permanent financing. So that's going to be your long-term loan. So it might be 15 or 30 years, and you refinance it out. So you just have your payment that you're making every month, like a mortgage. Well, it's your mortgage. But something to keep in mind is fluctuating rates. So a lot of folks have had some trouble over the last couple of years. So imagine it's 2021 and people can't find houses because there's no inventory. And they say, the heck with it, let's just go build, right? And so they start this process and interest rates are 2.5%, 3%. And they say, great, based on these interest rates, we can budget, $1 million budget for building our home. Well, now interest rates today are 6.5% or in the mid sixes, right? So if you anticipated owning this home at a 3% interest rate and now it's more than double, that can really be a hard thing to swallow. And really, are you going to be able to afford that? So when you have that time frame of building, a lot of things can change, and it can be, really a bummer if you're not going to be able to afford to live in that house after all that time and effort to build it. Now, there are some types of financing that allow you to do a single close, which allows you to have all your construction stuff taken care of in terms of loan, and then also the back-end financing for your long-term mortgage. And there are some lenders that do offer that. So that is a plus, but you got to be real specific about who you're working with. Okay. Another con is, you know what? It's going to take some time. And those timelines, honestly, are a moving target. So if somebody tells you you're going to move in June 1st, just pad it, because there's always delays, right? Maybe you don't have the contractor showing up on time. Maybe there's delays in terms of supply chain issues, which we all know is so common right now. Or there could be even just weather delays. So it's something you have to be really patient, and it'll test your patience, but it's worth it in the end. The reward is there. And then, when you move into your house, keep in mind, you might have to budget for some landscaping, because they're just there to build the house. You might need retaining walls. Maybe you're going to do some hardscaping or plant some trees or grass or whatever. That's all going to come later on as well. So the process timeline, if you're buying what we call a tract home, again, this is kind of working with a production builder, you're going to have initially, a couple weeks of interviewing realtors, getting pre-approved for that loan, a couple weeks to go and look at those new models to determine what it is you want to purchase and which one you're going to move forward with. About 9 to 12 months for construction. And then once it's complete, the full timeline, we're looking at about 10 to 14 months. Because when you're going and looking at a tract builder that has this community that they're building, they're trying to sell lots and get you locked in on your new construction home as soon as possible. So it's very rare that they have what we call inventory of homes, because they don't really want to start building something till they know they have a buyer for it. Now, towards the end of a community, sometimes the inventory ends up being the model home when they're looking to, get out of that community, and the model home is available for purchase. But typically you're starting from the dirt and moving your way up. So that's going to be about a 12 to 14 month time frame if you're buying a tract home. And if we look at a custom home build, here's kind of what we're considering. So you're, again, looking at 1 to 2 weeks, find a realtor, and you want to get pre-approved for that construction loan. Boy, what a bummer it would be to buy some land and then you can't get approved for a construction loan, right? So before you even go and look at any property, make sure you're talking to a lender so you understand what the costs are associated with having a construction loan and what it truly is going to cost to go vertical with your property. Then you're going to want to take some time, and really this is key, to interview architects and contractors. So through the whole process, those are going to be 2 critical people that are part of your team. So you're going to have your architect who's going to be designing what you're going to live in. And maybe you've had some ideas in your head, or maybe you're not quite sure. I mean, you've really got to be able to work with someone that can almost be a mind reader and determine what kind of home that you're looking for that's going to fit your needs for how you're going to use it. And then your general contractor is going to be your best friend through this whole process. You're going to be talking to them almost daily. And, who's the site foreman too? I mean, that's a critical person for you to interview as well, because they're going to be the person right there at that home every day, making sure things are running smoothly and they're going according to plan and what you desire and have designed for your house. So I recommend talking to many different contractors. Truthfully, I sometimes go through a lot of research, but I started with a list of about 12 contractors, narrowed it down to about 3, and then we chose the one that we move forward with. So, there's some folks, they're just going to tell you, listen, we can't touch this for another 3 years. It could be timing that prevents you from working with them, could be cost. There's a number of different factors, but you want to make sure you're picking the right person. It's going to take some time to shop for land. So you're going to get out there. And then let me tell you, when you're working with a realtor, you want to work with someone that has done this before. Far too often, I see land that changes hands multiple times. I'm talking 5, 6, 7 times before someone finally builds on it. And unfortunately, I think they're working with folks that don't have a lot of experience when it comes to land. And so they may not be getting the best advice. And they get in over their heads, and then a year or 2 later, that land sells and someone else picks it up. And until they actually get the best advice, that's when I see homes get built. It's going to take some time to draw out those architectural plans. It really kind of depends on how picky you are. Are you going to scratch things and go back to the drawing board every time? Or are you really going to get focused and you kind of know what you want? That's how it'll dictate the timeline. And then once you break ground, you're looking at about a 12-month time frame from breaking ground, that first shovel or that first excavator in the ground, till when it's complete, and you get what's called your certificate of occupancy, or CO, and that's when you can move in. So that means the county has signed off on the house. They're verifying that every step along the way, you've passed all the inspections, you've got heating, plumbing, electrical, water and sewer and all that good stuff, and then you can move in. So that time frame, again, we're looking at 18 to 24 months. So when you are building with a tract home, something to think about is that you can certainly walk into a model home and start engaging with a sales member right away, but it really does pay off to have a realtor as your advocate. There are things that we're aware of in terms of what you can perhaps get from the builder as an incentive, how you can potentially get upgrades, and it really does help to have someone there to answer your questions. You're not going to get a discount on that home if you don't have a realtor, so you might as well have someone in your corner that can help you through that process. And you want to walk through the home in multiple stages, whether it's just in framing or once the drywall's in, and just be able to see what's happening. And your realtor is going to be able to keep an eye on things for you throughout that process, make sure things are getting done to the quality that you want. Now, when you're buying a tract home, keep in mind that they generally just have a menu. There might be 3 or 4 options in terms of what you can pick, and that's it. So they're not going to allow you to add a closet here or remove a bedroom. They just are trying to get in and out with a little bit of changes or no changes between home to home to home. It's a production facility and they want to get in and get out. So you coming in and having modifications is really not going to be an option. Now, the one place you could do that is, let's say you have a 2-story home with a basement, is you could have that home ordered with an unfinished lower level or basement. And that's where you can come in and customize it later. So if you feel like the original footprint of the home is suitable for living today, and you just want to enjoy the house and then determine down the road, how could you use that space down in the basement? You can hire your own contractor and do whatever you want later on. That's one area where you could customize down the road. Now, keep in mind, if you've driven around town, you see those flags flying in the wind and they're indicating, hey, this community is available starting in the 500s or from the low 700s or whatever. Keep in mind that's their base price, right? So they usually have what's the base price, and then you're going to go and you're going to pick your lot. And so where is it on the street? What location? So are you at the end of a cul-de-sac? Are you on a corner? Are you wedged between 2 homes? Depending on the lot size or views, you might have what's called a lot premium. So you're going to pay a little bit extra to have that specific location. And also, they're going to have what's called builder grade finishes. So that's the cheapest thing they can throw in for lighting fixtures, plumbing fixtures, all that good stuff. But you can go to what they call the design center, and they're going to have another menu of some options. So maybe you get to pick, the low, medium, or high grade in terms of cabinetry doors or flooring options. Maybe you want hardwood instead of carpet. And you have to be really careful because it'd be very easy at these design centers for that number to get rolled up pretty quickly. And so this is where a realtor can be very helpful to kind of rein you in, make sure you're staying within budget so you don't over improve for the neighborhood. Let's say you have to move in a short time period, you may not get that money back. When you are looking at these tract homes, keep in mind, you just have a menu of finishes. So there's not a lot of deviation. It's A, B, and C. That's about it. And you don't have a whole lot of control over the quality. So you're not picking who the plumber and electrician and the contractor is for your home. So you really have to do some homework on who the builder is and what their reputation is for quality. Keep in mind too, if you are in a huge community and you're one of the first homes that's completed, it's kind of exciting to be able to move in. But if they're still building on that street or around the corner or throughout the community, you're going to have, noise, construction dust, extra traffic, a lot of activity of people coming in and out and looking at the homes that are available. So, do you want to just move into a neighborhood where it's kind of quiet? You can enjoy your house. Keep in mind that if you are one of the first ones there's going to be a lot of activity. And like we talked about earlier, you can always customize your home later with that unfinished basement. Now, when you're building a custom home, one of the things to think about is who else is involved in this process besides you. So are you just building it yourself, or do you have a significant other? Because you want to make sure you're on the same page in terms of finishes. What if one of you really likes rustic and the other one is really into modern? And how do you find that middle ground to make sure that the house isn't just a hodgepodge of, different design choices? You really want to have a seamless flow throughout the whole house, and not have, the master be very modern and the kitchen be very rustic or something in between, right? So you want to get on the same page as far as design, or else it's going to be a little bit of a battle picking selections throughout the whole process, because there's a lot of choices that you have to make. Everything from where the outlets are going to go to the windows to the door handles, everything. And so you want to make sure you're on the same page with your significant other as to how that's going to look. And I would recommend being decisive too, because imagine you start going down this process and you say, oh, wait a minute, I think I want the stairwell, not over here, but on the other side of the house. Well, that's going to be really expensive. And every time you change something, it's extra time, probably extra lumber and materials, and it's going to get very expensive. So you really want to make sure you're happy with the floor plan and you're happy with how things are going to look before you really start getting to town on this stuff, because it can be pretty pricey. Now, when you're working with a custom home builder, it is a big time commitment. I almost say it's like having at least another part-time job, if not a full-time one, because there are a lot of choices. There's a ton of meetings. You got to meet with your architect pretty regularly, review the plans, think about it, make modifications. You're going to pick out so many different things. Like I said earlier, just the appliances, the cabinetry, the flooring, where are you going to hang the lighting fixtures? Do you want the doors to swing in? Or, there's so many different things that you have to consider, and there's lots of meetings. So you're going to go to the lighting store. You're going to go to the plumbing store where you're going to pick out the toilets and the sinks, and you're going to pick out appliances, and it can be fun, but keep in mind, this is going to take some effort. And if you don't make yourself available to be at all these meetings, that can lengthen your timeline. And you're going to want to stop by the home pretty regularly. Of course, everyone's excited, right? They want to come see how things are progressing. But it is good to be there pretty often. And quite frankly, I was lucky enough to build a home in a neighborhood where it was already existing. So it wasn't a real far drive, but we were at the home several days a week, just checking in on things, making sure that it was progressing, seeing the transitions and making sure there were no mistakes being made too. I remember one specific point I had in my head. We have a Labrador retriever that we were going to have a dog wash in the garage. So I'd be able to give him a bath and he'd have his own little area and it'd be tiled and we'd have water there. Well, I arrived at the house one day and I saw it set up in the garage. I thought, oh my gosh, this is taking up a ton of space. So I pulled my truck into the garage, and sure enough, there was just a lot of square footage it was taking up where I could put, bikes or the garbage cans. And I said, you know what? I can just use a hose. Let's scrap that, right? So yes, it was a change order, fairly minimal probably in terms of cost, but now I've got a little bit extra space in my garage. So those are the kind of things that you want to be there regularly so you can catch them as early as you can. Now, like I mentioned earlier, those rates for your lending can change during the construction period, and that can make things potentially more expensive if the rates do go up. Of course, we all hope they go down, but just want to be prepared that it could cost you more money along the way. Also, could your housing needs change during construction? What if you were really set on one specific geographic location and then somebody gets a new job or a promotion, and that's going to mean commuting to a different part of town? Or maybe you're currently working from home and then your new position or the current one requires you to now start coming into the office again, right? Hearing a lot about that in our kind of post-COVID world, right? So keep that in mind, that things can change along the way, because this is about a 2-year process. So are you really kind of set in what you want? Now, there's some things that you can do to save some money. One of the things we talk about a lot is value engineering. So are there spots within the home that may not be as visible regularly, that maybe you can put in maybe a little cheaper window? So for instance, we've got nice windows in our house, but in the garage, we just have some regular windows. They're not casement. They're just, bypass. And it's something that's very easy to go ahead and do because no one's going to see that, right? And it may not save you a ton of money, but little places it does add up. And think about what can't be retrofitted too. Like I talked earlier about having that 0 entry to my house, so there's no steps into the home. That's not something I can change later. So we had to hang our floor joists a little bit differently. Cost me a little bit more money to do that in terms of the engineering. But now, like I said, knock on wood, I can live in my home for many decades and I have to worry about stairs. Same with heating, right? Like I've got in-floor radiant heat in my house. That would be really hard to add later with forced air. On the flip side, as things are getting warmer, and boy, it would be nice sometimes in the summer to have air conditioning. I don't have the ductwork for that. So I have to think about what am I going to do? It might just be a matter of putting in some fans, or we've got a whole house fan that really draws that cool air in the evenings. And so far that seems to be doing the trick. But, just think about what are the things that are hard to change later on. And those are the things I would recommend investing in from day one. Okay. Now, the last thing to think about too is supply chain delays. With COVID, we've had a lot of issues with manufacturing. I know it was gone through different cycles, like whether it was steel that was hard to get, or appliances, or roof shingles. There were all sorts of different stages in this COVID timeframe where things were kind of hard to get. So it's starting to improve, but just be aware that there could be a time where all of a sudden you hear, geez, concrete, all of a sudden it's like a 6-week delay, and just going to have to be flexible. Now, when you are buying land, if you are doing something, say up in the foothills, right? It's not a tract home neighborhood down in town, but you're buying land, plot for building your own home. Keep in mind, a lot of people, when they move to Colorado, they really want views, and you can't change the view. So whether you're looking at a 14er like Mount Evans and snow-capped peaks and expansive valleys and mountains, awesome. You also can't change it if you're looking at the back of a school, or maybe it's a commercial site, right? So the view is the view. And for a lot of people, that's the thing they're willing to invest in, because you're going to have that for quite some time. Keep in mind, you also want to look at what the access is like. So are you on a publicly maintained, like a county maintained or paved road, or is it a private drive that might be an easement and you have to gather together your neighbors to manage and pay for snow removal, or just maintaining the gravel, or if you're going to pave it someday. So those are things to be aware of. And then also the fire department has really gotten involved over the last couple of years in approving the driveways, because if there's an emergency, we all hope it's not going to be us, but it could be anybody. You want to make sure that that fire truck or ambulance can get into the driveway and turn around. And so they're going to check the approach, and they're one of the partners in this process that signs off on your layout of your driveway and your property. So I hear from a lot of folks that contact me and they're like, oh, we got this great deal on this land and now we can't build on it because they didn't do their due diligence and it's really steep, and putting in that driveway to accommodate first responders is going to be cost prohibitive. So they thought they saved a ton of money on this land, but now there's a ton of excavating that needs to be done, and where they want to put the house is not quite going to capture the view anymore because of the driveway access. So it's really important to understand. Now, one of the things you can do is hire what's called a land planner. I highly recommend this. This is where somebody can come in and they're going to look at your property, and it's almost like a landscape architect, but they're going to look at, kind of what's the shape of the home you're going to have. Is it going to be ranch, so it's going to be long and take up a big footprint, or is it going to be tall, 2-story building? Is there a view? Are you going to try to capture that? How do you orient the home that all the windows are going to look at that view? How do you make sure that the driveway is easy? And they're going to give you some direction on setting up where the foundation for the house should go. And I tell you, it's huge in terms of the investment you make. A few $1,000s and paying a land planner can save you tens of thousands of dollars in not having to excavate or blast through granite to get the house in the right space. So something that's really important to think about. And speaking of blasting, those cool rock outcroppings that are really neat to see, they can be just the tip of the iceberg, right? So you have this little like rock outcropping in the corner, and it can be just a huge vein of granite. And that could be pretty pricey when it comes to blasting and excavating and all that stuff. So really keep that in mind too. So also in the foothills, if you're building a house, most of us here have water and septic that service, or I'm sorry, a well and a septic. And septic is one expense that's, necessary, of course, but a well, you have to go through that process of hoping, fingers crossed, that you get a good well and good production. Okay. So it's not a guarantee when you start drilling that you're going to hit some fractured rock or somewhere that you're going to get some water. Okay. And sometimes that can take several holes for the well driller to get a really good spot for you to have good water. So keep that in mind, that can be a little bit of a risk when it comes to buying some land and building from scratch. Now, there are some communities in the foothills that do have the ability to tap into the water. The homestead is one example. You're just going to pay that tap fee. I think it's close to $30,000 to just tap into the water. We only have a few lots left in the neighborhood in order to do that. But now you're guaranteed water, right? As long as you're paying your bill every month, you've paid your tap fee, now you've got water. If you're buying land, maybe it's a little bit more remote and you're drilling that well, it's kind of a crapshoot. You don't know what you're going to get. Okay. So that's just something to be aware of, because most people don't drill to verify the water exists while they're under contract on the land. You're really just kind of rolling the dice with them. Also, if you're living up in the foothills, keep in mind wildfire danger is a real thing up here, right? And so part of the process is when you are building, you have to do a couple steps to make sure that the home is mitigated and safe against wildfire. So imagine you've got 2 acres and it's all wooded. Okay. Well, clearly you're going to have to cut down some trees where the driveway and the footprint of the house is going to be. So where is the foundation for that house? Of course, that all has to be cleared, right? But then the county, I'll talk specifically about Jefferson County because it's more the Front Range foothills. They're going to have you clear, obviously, that driveway and the foundation, but then you're going to have concentric rings that go out from the foundation. And there's going to be different parameters as to how much vegetation you can have in each of those rings. And so the first ring might be 10 or 20 feet out from the foundation of the house, and there's going to be no vegetation, period. Then that second ring is going to be more trees, but there's going to be spacing between the crowns of the tree, and that's going to be, the tips of the tree. And then further out, there's going to be some other requirements. And then the further you get away from the home, the denser the forest can be. You're really trying to create this space that would prevent the home from going up in flames if the fire came through. The county also has started putting together these, what we call wildland urban interface building codes. And they're really starting to push on some fire resistant exterior materials. So composite decks, like a Trex or similar material, metal railings on the decks, metal roofs, cement board siding, stone siding, things that are more resistant to fire because it is a real danger up here. Okay. Some municipalities or fire districts are requiring interior sprinklers. So again, another thing you have to budget for, depending on when you're building. And when you are done with that home, you really want to consider that defensible space with hardscaping, right? So just because you're done with the house doesn't mean you can throw a whole bunch of new trees in. And honestly, part of the process is in order for you to get your building permit, a forester has to come and inspect the property and make sure that you've met all of these requirements for defensible space. And even if you buy an existing home, if you pull a permit to put in a new deck, renovate something in the house, they're going to require you to meet those defensible space requirements as well. So that is something that is in place here in Jefferson County. So a little bit about investments. We can go through this. So if you're building a custom home, starting from the beginning, you're going to buy your land, you're going to do surveys. That's part of the, due diligence process when you're under contract on land. You want to make sure that what's being represented as the land you're purchasing is exactly what you're expecting. Something you can do is what's called soils tests. And this way you can determine, how deep is that vein of granite? Are you going to have to blast, or can the excavator kind of get after it with his equipment? So those are things that you want to kind of research up front. Highly recommend a land planner. Can't stress that enough. Critical member of your team. You're going to have a lot of site prep, tree mitigation if you're in the foothills, architectural plans, permitting. These are all things that you're going to pay for up front before your construction loan kicks in. You're also going to start with a loan appraisal and closing costs associated with your construction loan and your general contractor deposit. This is just kind of a comprehensive list. There's probably a few other things that could easily get added onto here, but these are the basics, and you could be talking about $50,000 to $75,000 right out the gate. And when you do your financing, you really want to make sure that you're working with someone that understands construction loans. There's a few that if you want to reach out to me later, I'm happy to refer you guys out to, but keep in mind that what you want to have is someone that has what we call quick draw releases. So every time your contractor sends in an invoice to the lender for the lumber or for the concrete for the foundation or for all the plumbing fixtures or the 3 weeks of labor for those framers, you want to make sure that those payments go out quickly. Because imagine there's a delay and that framing crew hasn't gotten paid, they're going to move to the next project. Why? They're not going to stick around at your house where they're not getting paid. So that's something that's really important to understand as well. Is you really make sure that you've got a lender that's going to be paying out quickly, okay, within a few days, no more than a week of when that request goes in. Now that construction loan is going to be about 12 months, so keep that in mind. And your appraiser is going to review that rough budget and finish selection to determine really what the home could be worth. And that could be tough. I mean, they're trying to look at your floor plans and envision what you're trying to do and find homes that have been built recently that are new. And a lot of people just move into their new house. They don't sell it right away. So that can be very challenging for an appraiser to do. So keep in mind that when you start this process with your construction loan, that the interest is going to accrue as your balance increases. So you might start out with $1 million budget for building. And then as, you know, the excavator gets paid and the contractors for, you know, doing the foundation, and then the lumber comes in, and then these finishes, that your balance is growing. And so that interest is going to accrue based on the balance. So if you're in a position where maybe you've sold another home, you're getting close to when you're going to move into the new house, take some of that money from the old home and put it towards the construction loan, because remember that interest is accruing every day. So if you can keep that daily average balance down, it's going to help. Keep in mind that with that construction loan, most lenders allow you to not have to pay payments on that throughout that process. So that's all going to be rolled into your loan. So you're not going to be paying a mortgage plus your construction loan. Again, I can refer you to some great lenders that can give you all the details. And you really want to have a contractor that's going to stay on the timeline, because time is money, right? So you want to get that financing taken out as quickly as possible from that construction to the permanent financing. So let me give you guys some advice. Now we talked about a lot of stuff here, but I'm going to kind of boil it down to key things I learned, that some of these I heard about before we get started and some I just learned along the way. So first thing is get pre-approved for your construction loan before you buy the land. The last thing I want anybody to do is buy some land and they're like, well, shoot, now I can't afford to build, or what I thought I was going to be able to build is going to cost a heck of a lot more, or I can't do it on this site. Whatever the situation is, now you're stuck with a really expensive camping site. That really stinks, right? And then you got to try to sell it. So do all your homework up front to determine, based on what you think you want to build, what you can afford. I'd also recommend starting the loan process with 2 different lenders. Okay. Like I said, I've got a group of people that I recommend, but I had my loan through 2 different lenders, and we did 2 appraisals, because like I mentioned earlier, it's really difficult for an appraiser to envision what your house is going to look like and what it could be worth in a year. And sometimes they just don't get it right. So we had one appraisal that was wildly off. They were using comparable sales of homes I actually, as a realtor, had sold. And I wrote a huge rebuttal and I said, this is wrong. We got to fix this. And, you know, there's red tape and egos involved, and it was really hard to get that changed. But the other lender, smooth sailing, exactly what we needed. Great appraisal. If I had started with the bad lender, I hate to use the word bad, but the one where the appraiser didn't come in correctly, and then wasted all that time and had to do a whole nother application, I was losing out or lengthening my timeline. So that's why I started 2 applications at once. Yes, I paid for 2 appraisals, but as soon as I knew which direction I was going, we could just remove that old lender and move on with who we were using. Highly, highly, highly recommend hiring a realtor that understands land. There are so many nuances, especially in the foothills, that there's just not a lot of realtors that have experience in land. You've got the whole scope of the 30,000 real estate agents in the state. How many of them are actually pretty active? How many of them work in the area you're looking at? How many have done new construction and understand land? I mean, there's a very small number of people. So really make sure that you're working with someone that is giving you the best advice, especially if it can come from practical experience like I've been through myself. Again, I can't say this enough. Highly recommend investing in a land planner. Great money, great investment spent. You can maximize your view, minimize grading expense, just any sort of impact as it relates to the fire department, having access as well. And really take your time finding an architect and a builder. And when you're interviewing the builders too, great tip is to find out some references for that builder in various stages of their build. So go to a job site that's active and take a look around. Like, are people actually working, or is there just one guy there, or girl? Is the lumber nice and organized, or is it just, I've literally seen this, like somebody threw up a book of matches and they all just landed, because somebody's organized is being careful to make sure there's no waste. Someone just has a pile of stuff in the garage. How careful are they with building your house and being, having a good attention to detail? So that's really important. Quite honestly, we went to a couple different homes. One of them was a mess. There was just stuff everywhere, and you could tell they were not organized. And the others were very, very organized in terms of the job site. Somebody was sweeping at the end of the day, and this just also prevents any sort of injury too. You don't want to have somebody get hurt on your job site. And also go through a home where like somebody just moved in. So they're going to give you their honest experience, having just gone through the process, and someone that's been in the home for maybe 5 years, because now they've been there and they can see, oh, well, the house was settling, or everything's really solid, or here's some issues, or how is the home holding up over that time frame? Those are really important things to do. It's really important to make sure you hire a GC or general contractor that you're going to have good rapport with, but understand how they're going to communicate with you too. When I built my home, my general contractor used something called Co-Construct, and it was a software where we kept track of every little detail on the house. And even to the point where if I would tell, Randy, hey, I want this particular square knob on my bathroom drawers instead of the round one, he would say, great, go put it in the software, because it's documentation and it's just one place that you can go. We don't have to remember a conversation or sift through emails to verify things, and it holds everybody accountable. So if you say you want this change and your budget goes up a little bit, well, now it's documented. Or if you told them you wanted this one particular item and they do something else, well, it's also documented. So understand how your contractor is going to communicate with you. And like I mentioned earlier, visiting homes under construction and recently built really will tell you a lot about the quality of the home that you're going to get. And, if you're working with a significant other, again, with that communication, you don't want to be maybe inserting into different conversations or feeling like your partner did one thing and maybe they didn't, or vice versa. Understand how you're going to divide and conquer when it comes to the house. For me, it was all about the land acquisition, the financing. I'm very numbers driven and organized in that manner. And my husband used to work for a custom home builder when we first got married over 20 years ago. And so I said, you know what, you're in charge of quality control. So I need you to kind of be there and understand some of the things that are happening, because you've done this before too. So understand what your skill set and interest is and kind of help each other out so that you know how to get this done together as a team. And also you can use such tools like Houzz or Pinterest to kind of come up with ideas. So go on there and just, heart or favorite or pin things that kind of speak to you in terms of design or floor plans. And then when you give that to your contractor or your architect, they're going to understand, oh, this is the kind of stuff that my client is really interested in. Now we can start to design based on this. So it's kind of a mood board for what you're interested in. Some other great advice, visit the construction site daily. You want to be there as often as possible, truthfully, because there's things that are going to change and you're going to be excited. I imagine you aren't going to let a whole lot of time pass between visits, but there's things that you want to make sure that you're catching if there's a mistake. And I'm not saying that happens often, but you just want to be there regularly, kind of see how the process is unfolding. And finally, don't get married to the move-in date. Things change. You got weather, you have people can get sick, you've got logistics and, supply chain issues, and just kind of have to be flexible. So don't get in your head that, yep, I am definitely moving in June 1st, because it's kind of a moving target. So, and if your builder can get it done even earlier, great. It's going to save you on your construction loan. but just kind of keep in mind, it's more of a season that you're going to move in instead of a hard date. So try to be as flexible as possible. So that's really what I wanted to cover today. And I am happy to answer questions. If anybody has any, feel free to, take yourself off mute or, throw a question in the chat box. Kind of here, I'm willing to hang out for a few minutes and answer questions, but I hope I cover quite a bit of information that you found to be helpful. So I'm just going to go ahead and pause. So feel free to jump in. If you have questions, take yourself off mute or type something in the chat box. Okay. I know there's some folks on Facebook as well, so you can always contact me. Feel free to shoot me a text, email, phone call. Happy to answer any questions that you have. Like I said, I've been through this process. I've helped clients do it themselves as well. So happy to give you some input, connect you with the right folks so you can be on your way. So thank you again for joining. Hope you have a great evening. Stay warm, and I will see you guys around. Take care.